and welcome everyone to our session today. As Matthew said, we'll be talking about Excel for finance professionals and accountants. And if you have your practice file open, I should say your handout there open, you're going to see that our first topic today is actually going to be talking about named ranges. When it comes to working in Excel, when we want to do number crunching of any way, we want to analyze our data, we want to be doing trend analysis, whatever type of information it is that you're storing in Excel, if you want to further analyze that information, we have a few features that are essential tools that you could, or should I say, should be using in Excel. And one of those is going to be naming cells or naming ranges of cells. We can click a cell or a range of cells and actually give it a name to uniquely identify the contents of that cell. So as an example, I'm on this references worksheet, and I'm going to be creating a formula to calculate out the commission for each of the salespeople. And I want to be referring to a single cell. In a normal formula, I would have to create the formula by using an absolute reference, where we would have a dollar sign with the column and the row number, the column letter and the row number, to lock a cell down so that we could copy it for the other employees. But if we name a cell, one of the benefits is that it becomes an absolute reference by default. So we do not have to have the dollar signs to lock a cell down. There are other benefits that I want to mention before we see how to create these and use these, but another benefit is going to be that it's easier to understand the formula. So if you are analyzing the information on a spreadsheet and you have the same formulas, well, I should say multiple formulas using the same ranges of cells, it's easier to have the cells named than having to keep going back and selecting the cells over and over and over again. And when somebody reads the formula, it will make more sense seeing text than it does a range of cells, especially when we throw in that dollar sign, which can sometimes confuse end users if they're not comfortable or familiar with what all that means. So it makes it definitely easier. But there are some rules, some guidelines, I should say, to naming cells. One huge guideline is no spaces in the names. So we cannot have a named range with spaces in it. Also, it can't be the same as a cell reference. So we couldn't name a range of cells QTR1, QTR2, because those are actually cells. So you can name them up to 255 characters long, but just so you know, you probably wouldn't do that. Keep them shorter and sweet, but don't abbreviate too much that you can't understand what it is. You want to name it so that you understand what it is. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how to name cells, and I'm going to do them in a couple of different sheets. One way is to just click on a cell. So right now I'm going to G2 for this commission rate because I want to use it in a formula. I clicked on G2 and I can see at the top left in the name box, it shows me I'm on cell G2. That is called the name box. We can use the name box to actually name a cell or range of cells that we selected. If you click in the box, you can just type the name. So if I type in commission, I'm not using an underscore, but I could use an underscore to separate the words. I'm just using capitalization to separate the words. But after I type the name, I can do enter, and I've automatically named that cell commission rate. Now I can actually use it in a formula. So if I start on G5 and I want to create a formula giving me the commission for the salespeople, I can do that by saying equal F5, because I want to take their total sales and multiply it by that commission rate of 4%. I'll say F5 asterisk G2, And if I click on G2, it's going to automatically put the name of the cell, which is commission rate. Then I'm going to do a control enter, and I'll see the answer to the formula. But when I look at the formula in the formula bar, I can see that it says equal F5 multiplied by commission rate. And that is letting us know we're using the commission rate, so it's easier to understand the formula. And because it is a named range, I can copy the formula because it's an absolute reference. So if I click and drag that formula down for the other salespeople, it'll automatically copy it down and I'm good to go. So that's an example of using a named range and creating one. Let me give you another example. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Employee Data. And let's say that I'm going to be doing multiple formulas using some of the ranges of data in this worksheet. I could select all the cells within this range. So I was clicked on it. I did a control A to select the entire range. And what I want to do is use the headings in row 5 to name each of the columns underneath. All I have to do is go to the Formulas tab of the ribbon. There is a Defined Names group. And in that group, I can click Create from Selection, which means I want to create a named range based on the cells I've selected. So it automatically in this window has two options checked. One is top row, where we can create the names from the values in the top row of what we selected. But it also has right column. We don't want to use the right column to help name, so I'm going to uncheck right column, just leave top row, and click OK. Now, how do we know what it just did or that it worked? Well, I can be clicked on any cell. And if I go to the name box at the top left and click the down arrow, I'm going to see a list of all of the named ranges. This is another shortcut, by the way, and a benefit to using named ranges. If I wanted to go back to commission rate, I could click the name commission rate from that drop down, and it's going to automatically navigate me back to the cell wherever it is within this workbook that is called commission rate. So we can use it to navigate between our sheets. If I go back to the name box and click on the drop down, if I choose department, it's going to automatically take me to that employee departments worksheet, and it's selecting the range of cells that is named department. So it's selecting C6 down through C52. So I can use those now in a formula, and the formula will use the name department without me having to go back and keep selecting that range. So a lot of benefits for naming your ranges. If that is not something you've been doing in the past, I would highly recommend working with named ranges from now on. They will save you so much time and energy. But let's talk about some of the essential functions for finance and accounting professionals. There are several finance functions built into Excel. If you go to the Formulas tab of the ribbon, on the left-hand side is the Function Library group. From there, there is a category called Financial, where you will see an alphabetized list of all of the finance functions. You will have other functions in other categories that are directly related to working with finance and accounting, especially when we talk about the top 5 functions available that people use mainly for finance and accounting. But what happens in this drop down is you can not only see the names of the functions, but if you hesitate your mouse on the function, you can see a screen tip and an example of the syntax of the arguments that would go along with it. But what if you want to know more information about that function? You can actually click Tell Me More. So when you're hesitating on the name of the function, if you need more information, click Tell Me More. What that's going to do is open a pane on the right-hand side of the screen, giving us access to all the different function categories. If we click financial functions, it's going to take us in and give us a description of each of those financial functions. So that might help you to understand a little bit more about it. But what if you go to one of these, like this one, CUMPRINC? It returns the cumulative, can't talk today, cumulative principal paid on a loan between two periods. If I want to know more about that function, you can click on the link based on the name of it, and it's going to deep dive into breaking apart the full arguments of each of the, I should say, the whole syntax, showing each of the different arguments that are available. And it will give you some examples of how to use it as well. So that's a great way to learn what those functions can do. And that's really with any function in Excel, even ones that are not directly related to finance. So one of the more commonly used, according to Microsoft, I kind of looked at some different websites and I used ChatGPT and I used Copilot to say, what are the, top finance and accounting type functions that get used? And PMT comes up as being in the top 3 in every search I've ever done. I gave you a list of some of the others. Sum is the number 1. It's the number 1 function for anything that we do. But PMT comes in at the top 5 all the time, along with an FV, the NPV, the IRR, and then of course our if, our lookup functions, our average, our max, our min. Those are going to be very commonly used as well. So this real estate financial modeling is based on an interest rate, a number of periods to repay back a present value. So if someone was going to be purchasing a home or something like that, we could use the PMT based on the current interest rates that that person would qualify for, and based on the number of months or periods they want to pay the loan back, we can figure out how much a month they would be paying. So when I go to cell B10, I have the formula answer. Because it is a payback, it is a negative value because it's being paid back, but how this formula actually works. And I'm just going to click on the cell next to it to show you how that formula works, is if I start with equal the letter P and I put in an M, I can get to the PMT function. I'm going to press my tab key. And when you look at a formula, when you first start it, if you're not quite sure what you're supposed to do, I highly recommend clicking on the FX. When you click on that insert function icon, if you've already started the formula, it's going to automatically take you into, let me go back here. I started with my PMT. I'm going to click on my insert function. So if you start a formula with the function name already in it and you click in the icon FX, it's going to open up the function arguments window. And what I like about this, I call it the helper window, is because it breaks apart each of the arguments and you can understand the formula a little bit better. So any of the finance functions that you go to use, whether it's the NPV, etc., whichever one, if you're not quite sure, do this. Start it, click on the insert function. From here, you can see that your cursor is in the rate field. It's got a rate, the NPER, the PV, the FV, and the type. Now, each one of those are going to be described in the middle of the window when you are adding values, or I should say clicked, within that field. So right now I'm on rate. So in the middle of the window, you can see that it says, is the rate per period for the loan? So for example, 6% divided by 4 for quarterly payments of 6% on the APR. So if I want to have, here it's 4.5%, which is on cell B4, I would put it in as B5, but I would say divided by 12 if it's going to be a monthly payment. Then we go to the field for the NPER, which is standing for, you can see in the middle of the window, it says, is the total number of payments for the loan. So how many months are they, or periods are they going to repay it back? So we have that on B6. So I can use cell B6 to get that answer. Because if I want to kind of play with the numbers, I can always change them on the cells themselves. And then the only other required argument in this formula is the PV, which stands for present value. That is the amount of the loan that someone would be getting. We have that on cell B8, the present value. Now, just so you can see, it does have two optional items, a field for the FV, which is the future value, and it has a type, which is a logical value based on when the payment is going to occur. I'm not going to put either one of those in there because it doesn't really require us to have those. So I'm going to leave them and I'm going to click OK. So I will see exactly that same answer that we had before. It's just showing you how we arrived at that answer. So I wanted to show you this one because of the fact that I wanted to break it down, being the most, in that top 3 of the most common for finance and accounting. This might be something that you've used in the past. But I have talked to a lot of accounting people and a lot of finance people, and they say they never use that function. So I've asked them, and my son is in finance and accounting as well, and I've asked him, and he says, yeah, I'm not doing loans, so I don't ever need to use something like that. But if you have anything that you're analyzing, let's talk about some commonly used features that you can be using that might be a little bit more relevant. So, of course, the sum is always going to be number one, no matter what category of finance, accounting, or manufacturing, etc. Sum seems to be at the top of the list every time that we look up functions. So I'm going to assume that you know how to use a sum function, but just for clarification purposes and to make sure everybody knows this shortcut, I'm going to go to this range of cells and I want to add together all of the totals for each quarter, put the answers in row 10. The way that this is set up, I don't have any empty spaces or anything. I can select the blank cells where I want the answers to appear and simply click the auto sum. It will automatically add all the numbers in the rows above it. It stops when it sees text or a blank cell. So that is a super quick, easy way to use that sum function. But just to take you into a few others that are extremely popular, we're going to talk about using an if function. An if function is a great way to say, if this is true, do this. But if whatever we're evaluating is false, do this. There are a lot of if functions that are built into Excel that are used on a daily basis in both finance and accounting. The one we're going to use right now is going to be based on, was the sales met? So did each of these salespeople have a total sales that was greater or equal to the sales goal for that person? We're going to say that everybody has a sales goal on G1 of $6,500. And we need to know if they've met their sales. We can use an if function very easily to do that. So just very briefly, I'll show you this. If I start on H5, I can say equal if, so letter I can press my tab to do my if and it starts it. It's looking for what is the logical test, the value if true, the value if false. I'm going to click on the FX to do this, just so you could see this is a way I could create this formula or I could manually do it. But basically, I wanted to look at F5 to see if it is greater than or equal to G1. But if I want to copy this formula down for the other employees, G1 is not a named range. It is just a regular cell. So I would need to do my dollar signs for G1 because of the fact that it needs to be an absolute reference. So I just pressed my F4 function key, which is a keyboard shortcut, to add in the dollar signs for my G1 so that when I copy this formula down, it will always stay G1. Normally, I don't do that. I would do a named range, but just so you could see this. Then what do I want it to do if the value is true? Let's say that I just want to say, yes, sales goal was met. Just so you could see, I could do that. And then value if false, if they didn't meet their sales goal, we could say sales goal not met. And maybe I want that capitalized, not met. And as soon as I'm done, it's adding quotes where the quotes are needed with text in the formula. It's adding commas to separate the arguments, so I don't have to do all that. All I have to do is click OK. The first person met the sales goal, so it gives us that answer. But if I copy this formula down for the others, the first person is the only one that really met their sales goal. The other ones are coming back with the false answer, which is sales goal not met. So an if function can be a very common feature to be using within Excel for finance and accounting. But just to give you a couple of other examples of how these can be used, you can be using what is called a sum if. There's count if, there's average if. These are very popular features as well. And here on this employee departments, I'm going to go to cell G2 and I'm going to basically tell the computer that I want to add together only the salaries if the person is in the marketing department. So I want to do a sum if. And so I'm going to start on cell G2. I'm going to do equal SU. From the dropdown, I'm going to double click on sum if. It's looking for the range of cells I want to evaluate, which is going to be the department column. I named that earlier, so I'm going to do DE. I'm going to type DE. I'm going to double click on department and it selects that range for me. I'm going to put in a comma and put in what my criteria is. In quotes, I'm going to type marketing and then another comma to say if the department is marketing, what are the numbers I want to add together? I'm going to use the named range called salary. So as soon as I start typing SA, I can double click on salary. So it's automatically using those named ranges that I created a few minutes ago. I'm going to press enter and you can see in the formula bar, it's so easy to read this formula because it's basically saying sum if the department is marketing and add together the salaries. So by using named ranges, I didn't have to keep going back and selecting the cells. Because what if you are analyzing values from the past 5 years? Because you need to make trend analysis and things like that. You don't want to keep going back and having to select them over and over again as you are making your formulas. This is going to be a much easier option. Now, another great option is the average if. If you want to get an average if the values match a specific criteria, we can use an average if. So if I start out with the AV, I can double click average if. It works just like the sum if to say, I need to first know what is the range of cells that you want to base the criteria. That's going to be the department again, comma. I want to know if the department is marketing. So I'll use the same department, comma, what are the cells I want to get the average of? I'm going to use salary. So the average if is saying I only want to get an average if it matches this criteria. Now we're just doing some basic things today with these, but these are very, very commonly used. These are things that if you don't already know how to use them, I would highly recommend getting to know them. Other common functions can actually be things like a lookup function. Built into Excel 365, you have several lookup functions that you could be using. I'm only going to do one for you today, and it's called an XLOOKUP. I used to use VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, match, index, those types of functions, but I don't use any of them except for the XLOOKUP these days because it does everything those other ones did plus more. So in this list of employees, I want to be able to find a specific employee's information. I can use an XLOOKUP to find that information. Let's say that on C2, I want to find the last name of the person. I could do equal X, double click on XLOOKUP, and the first thing it wants to know was, what is the lookup value? Well, I want to look up the employee ID number that's on cell B2. Then I want to do a comma to say, what is the range of cells that we're going to find that employee ID number? I have that as a named range, so I'm going to type an E, double click employee ID, so it selects that column. Then I need to put in a comma, and it wants to know, well, what is the column you want to return the value from? I want to find their last name, so I'm going to type an L. I'm going to double click on the named range called last name, and I could stop right there. But I'm going to continue with one more argument, which is an optional argument, and that is if not found. We do have a built-in function in Excel that allows us to do if error that could be added to an added to a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP or any function. But built into the XLOOKUP function is the error alert, where we can actually put in a comma to go to the if not found and type in what we want it to say. I could say invalid, I have to type that correctly, invalid employee ID. So if somebody puts in a wrong ID number, I want the computer to say that, as opposed to giving us a generic error. As soon as I control enter, it's going to automatically give me the answer looking up that employee ID. So an XLOOKUP is a great way to be able to look up information within a range of data, no matter what your range is. Now I'm using an example of employee information, but it's the same case for anything that you are looking up. If you need to audit information in a list of orders, or you need to audit information that was exported out of your accounting system, or whatever the case would be, an XLOOKUP is a great option to look up records of information to find a value. So great option to know, to understand. But of course, we have so many different ways to do things. Another good option to understand is a subtotal function. A subtotal function could be used in place of SUMIF. In place of SUMIF, I could actually go to G3 and do equal subtotal. And the subtotal function does different functions within it. So we could do averages, counts, max, mins, we could do sums, etc. I'm going to say I want to do a sum, and I want to, so it has a hidden code behind the scenes. It knows that if I put in a 9, that's telling the computer I want to do a sum with this subtotal function. So those codes that you saw was a list of, so average is a number 1, etc. Each number is a code for the function you want it to use. After the 9, I just need to tell it, well, what are the cells I want to add together? I'm going to say I want to add together the salaries. So I want to get a sum of all the salaries. If I do Control Enter, it's adding together every salary. But that's not what I want. What if I actually want just the marketing department? Like, that's why I use that SUMIF. Well, what if you were going to change your mind on a regular basis? We could filter the data within this employee list, by going to our data tab of the ribbon, turn your filters on. And if I go to the drop down for department, I see a unique list of all the different departments. I'm going to uncheck the select all. I'm going to select marketing and click OK. And the subtotal automatically now matches just to see the marketing department's subtotal of all their salaries, which matches with my sum if. Now, I could have done that same thing with the sum if to do the average if, because I could have said subtotal 1, comma salaries and gotten the same answer with the average if when I filter. So it kind of depends on your data set, kind of depends on what's going to work best for you. But these are great options to understand. Now, I'm just going to clear that filter from the department to bring all of those records back. And the last thing I want to show you for kind of talking about this information is data validation. On this employee worksheet, this employee departments, doesn't matter what type of data it is that you have, on B2, if you want to be able to easily switch out the employee ID numbers without having to manually type them in, you could create a data validation drop-down list. By simply going to B2 on the Data tab of the ribbon, in the Data Tools group, you can click the icon Data Validation. On the Settings tab, you could choose any value and say you want to use a list. You want to use a list drop-down list. I'm going to click in the source and I'm going to be entering in the employee ID. So the employee ID column is what I want it to reference. So if I click OK, it automatically gives me a drop-down list of all of the employee IDs. So I can just choose it from that list. Matthew, did we have a question?
Yes, someone was wondering why you used 9 in the subtotal.
Yes, the reason I use 9 is because when we create that subtotal function, let me just show it one more time. It has this 1 dash average, 2 dash count, 3 dash count A, etc. That number is the hidden code to the computer to let it know which function to do. So if on that last example, I double clicked 9 dash sum, but if I wanted to give me an average, I would double click the 1 dash average. Or if I knew the number, I could just physically type it in. Then it's looking for what is the range of cells you want to add together or get the average of. Okay?
Right. So rather than when you double click, rather than it populating sum, it just populates the number associated with that function. Right.
Exactly. Perfect. And now when I filter by marketing, I get the average if answer and the sum if answer by using a subtotal instead. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So if you're going to be changing your mind a lot, you're going to want to do a subtotal as opposed to the sum if or the average if. Now, all of this is kind of leading towards another feature built into Excel that is very common in accounting and finance, and that's pivot tables. I'm going to go to this worksheet called Subtotal Pivot, where I have a bunch of company orders. And I need to be able to analyze this data to really kind of troubleshoot any issues that we might have with any orders. I went and looked back at the security cameras and this didn't match up with what was shipped, that kind of a thing. I need to come back and kind of audit these records. Well, an easy way to do that is to create a pivot table. If you are clicked on a cell within your range of data that you need to analyze, an easy way to do that, 2 ways. You could go to the Home tab of the ribbon, and on the right-hand side, you could click Analyze Data. If you are using Microsoft Copilot, This analyzed data can automatically give you a box to type in a question. It can give you suggested questions, and it can give you instant pivot tables or pivot charts. So this would be one way to quickly and easily analyze your data. By the way, if you don't see that Analyze Data icon on your Home tab of the ribbon, you might just need to add it. Customize your ribbon, add the command, because it is available in Excel 365. Now, coming up next year in a session, we'll be talking more about this Excel Labs. But for right now, I'm going to say I just want to create a pivot table. I want to create it by myself manually. I could click on a cell within my range of my data, go to the Insert tab of the ribbon. I can click the icon for Pivot Table. It's going to select my range of cells. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It automatically creates a new sheet that I can create a pivot table on to analyze my records of information. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a pivot table field list that you can use to select the columns. So back in the original worksheet, the headers in the top row of your data are now the field names on this pivot table on the right-hand side. So if I want to do salespeople, I click salesperson. In column A, it's going to add a unique list of every salesperson. If I choose extended price, it instantly gave me a subtotal for each individual salesperson based on all their sales. So in column B, I get a sum of extended price, which is a subtotal by salesperson. But if I need to see what companies did they sell to, I could go to the field list on the right, I could click the company name, and indented under the name of the salesperson will be every company they sold something to. It will change to give the subtotal for how much they sold to that company. So this bottom dollar markets, Andrew Fuller sold $5,436 worth. If I scroll down, I can see Ann Dodsworth sold to bottom dollar markets, but only $1,208 worth. So it only shows under that salesperson if they sold something to that person. There is not an easier way to drill in and get this information out of your standard columns and rows of data. It would be a nightmare to try and do that in the regular worksheet. Believe me, I did that for years before pivot tables came out. I've been using Excel since it was first released, and I got to tell you, I love these pivot tables. I use them every day for analyzing my accounting and my finance information for my business. It is by far the best tool in Excel, I swear. But it does have a lot more options to it that I do want to show you. Because what if I wanted to filter this data? Because I want to be able to drill in and see the product names. I want to see by country how many things were sold in a country. I want to be able to see date ranges. We can actually use a slicer to filter our data. So from the Pivot Table Analyze tab on the ribbon, I'm going to click Insert Slicer. I'm going to add the fields I want to filter by. I'm going to filter by country, I'm going to filter by salesperson, and by product name. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to give me 3 separate windows. I'm going to scroll up here and move these up to the top a little bit better here. Sorry. I was way down at the bottom here. Let me move these up. Sorry. But just so you could see, what's going to happen is we can have these separate little windows to help us filter our data. So if I want to filter all these records of information by a product, I can click on the name of the product. It automatically filters the pivot table. So I can go back and I can say, well, let me just see Laura Callahan for Boston crab meat. It automatically filters based on that criteria. I can go to the slicer window at the top right, click Clear Filter on any of those, and it will bring all the records back. Because I also could do by dates. If I'm back on my pivot table, I can go back to the Pivot Table Analyze tab of the ribbon, click Insert Timeline choose my order date field, click OK, and I will have a timeline that I can use to filter by dates. So if I want to only see orders that were placed for February of 2024, I can click on that in the order date timeline window, and it updates my pivot table accordingly. But let me take this just a step further. I'm going to actually change this to say quarters, but I'm not currently filtered by any of these. I want to create one more pivot table. I'm going to go back to my raw data. I'm going to create one more pivot table, and you're going to see that I can put this pivot table on an existing worksheet on any cell I want it to be on. I'm going to click OK, so I can add an additional pivot table and or chart. And let's say that I want to see just salesperson and extended price. These two pivot tables are coming off the same range of data, and I want this pivot table to be called by salesperson because I can name my pivot tables. I'm going to click on this pivot table, and I'm going to say this is actually based on company name. And then I can go to my slicer and say, if I filter by this, I want both pivot tables to update at the same time. By going back to the slicer tab of the ribbon, when I'm clicked on a slicer, I can say report connections. And I can say that I want, excuse me, that slicer to use both pivot tables by salesperson and company name. I can go to the order date timeline, go to the tab on the ribbon, click report connections, choose by salesperson, go to the salesperson slicer. I would do it for each one of these report connections, connect all these slicers to work with all pivot tables on my sheet, because this could be my dashboard. This could be the dashboard of information that I want. And let me just move this for just a second here. I'm going to actually move this pivot table, just so you know you could do this. I want to move that pivot table and then keep all my slicers over here. I want to take this slicer, move it here, because we can rearrange and make things bigger, smaller, etc. But just so you could see, you can rearrange anything the way that you want it to be, and this could be my dashboard, where it's feeding off of multiple sheets or one set of data giving me multiple results. But how does it work? If I go to country and I just click on Canada, it filters everything for Canada. It's filtering based on the pivot table for the companies. That's based on the salespeople's pivot table. And if I go to the order date and I say I only want to see Q1 for 2024, it's updating both those pivot tables again at the same time. So by utilizing multiple pivot tables, you can create a dashboard that can automatically be updating your information. Now, we're only going to barely touch the surface of how these dashboards could look, but you could put in a title for the entire dashboard up at the top left, and we could say, ABC company, accounting information, or, whatever it is that you want to be naming something. I didn't spell that correctly, but that's okay. Just so you could see, we could be doing things to, and let me move these down. I could have that come all the way across. We don't have to be on the same sheet, just so you could see how you could have this all look. But you don't have to have the raw data right here. You just want to be analyzing it from other locations. If I had other information from different sheets I wanted to bring in, like I want this information, I could copy or cut this, bring it into our dashboard, and have this information be here available as well, so that every time we switch to a different employee name, it brings up that employee information. So be thinking about the data that you're analyzing. And if you want to have an easy way to be able to see multiple things in one place, using a worksheet like this for a dashboard can definitely be a great way to do that. Then as we are filtering and sorting our data, it can automatically give us the results. But what if I go back to this salesperson, this pivot table I created for salesperson, and I want a chart to update with it? I want to be able to have a visual representation of this. I could go back to that pivot table, go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab, and on the right-hand side of in the Tools group, click Pivot Chart. I can have a pivot chart directly related to that pivot table. Now, of course, I have my chart tools. I can come in and change the appearance and do all of that. But how is that going to update? Well, if I go back to the order date and I clear that filter, it's automatically going to update things. Now, of course, it's covering up because I didn't plan ahead on bringing back all my records for my pivot table, just so you know I got an error. Because I pasted that data where my pivot table is going to override, because if I go back and clear from the country, it overrides it again. But it's automatically updating everything that is connected together. So any of the slicers, any of the timelines, if I go and say I just want to see Janet, it's going to update everything related to Janet. Or if I only want to see Austria based on all salespeople, based on just this product, it's going to update everything accordingly. So we can be feeding information through these different slicers with timelines, and everything can be connected together. So very, very common to use when it comes to working with financial data. I do have a little bit of information in your handouts on creating dynamic financial dashboards with visualizing your data coming from different data sets, having it all be on one worksheet. So those are definitely things to take advantage of. Now, there were a couple of other features that I wanted to mention here in Excel that are, some of these are relatively new. I'm going to jump back to the references worksheet, just as an example. One of the newer features here in Excel, I'm going to select a column of blank cells. You could go to the Insert tab and insert checkboxes without having to use a combo box, or I should say a checkbox from the Developer tab on your controls. It's an icon we can now use directly within Excel. So if you want to have a check-off list of some sort, you can add these checkboxes. When you check something off your list, you just click the box and it automatically marks it. Okay? We also have, because I know when we're in finance and accounting, you have a lot of worksheets. You can have as many worksheets as your resources on your computer, but it's not easy to navigate through all those sheets. If you go to the View tab of the ribbon, there is an option now in the Show group that is called Navigation. You can open a navigation pane. I'm going to move it to the left because that's where I use it the most, because that's where most navigation panes are, and it can be resized as well. But how do you use it? If I want to go to the real estate worksheet, I click in the navigation, it takes me there. If I want to go to a named range within a sheet, I like commission rate. It in each sheet in this navigation pane, it separates the data. So wherever you have cells of information, ranges of data, or named ranges, you can use this navigation to navigate to them. So in a lot of times, I'm using this constantly. I never close this navigation pane. It has become my best friend in Excel because I'm always jumping back and forth in between different worksheets, and I need to be able to quickly get to things. So this is a great way to be able to do that by using this new feature called Navigation. I'm going to go back to this subtotal pivot because what if I'm analyzing this particular order ID? Another feature on the View tab is called Focus Cell. In that Show group, if you click Focus Cell, every time I'm doing my books, I'm using focus cell because I'm focusing on what I'm auditing. So whichever cell I click on, it automatically is highlighting the column and the row based on that cell. So if you have not used that feature yet, I'm going to tell you it's I can't believe we finally have this. It is something that I have wished for from Microsoft for 15, 20 years. So now we have it. It's called Focus Cell. Click to turn it on, click to turn it off again. Great feature. Okay. Now, Matthew, we've gone through a lot of different things today that can be used in finance and accounting. We could probably do 20 different classes and not cover everything. So these were what I had found on a search to be what Microsoft and the search engines and everybody came back and said, these are the most common things that people should understand. So I hope people have picked up on some good tips that they can be using.